Thank you for joining us on today's broadcast. I'm meteorologist Emily Niebuhr. It's April 4th, 2023. Our phone number is 1-855-937-4977. You can find us on the web at weather.gov/Alaska or email us at nws.hr.tvweather@noaa.gov. Let's look at some of our weather headlines today. You can see we have winter weather advisories for the lower Yukon and the East Brooks Range. We also have a flow which is going to be bringing lingering precipitation across the Panhandle. Finally, for our astronomers out there, we have a full pink moon of April this Wednesday evening. We have below temperatures expected at least through mid-April. So again, cooler than normal conditions expected for the next few weeks across much of Alaska, and we're going to go into that in more details in a little bit. Let's look at some of those current advisories right now. As you can see, we'll show you in a minute, we do have a low pressure system and associated front that's bringing widespread persistent snowfall. Again, sometimes reducing visibility to 1/2 miles at times. Again, our greatest concern is 4 to 8 inches of snow in the Brooks Range through that important Dalton Highway corridor of travel. So AKwx Pass, Adigan Pass, 4 to 8 inches. So expect dangerous driving conditions at times and some blowing snow and reduced visibilities in those areas. Again, these advisories go until Wednesday morning. So snow and blowing snow throughout your night and evening hours across much of interior Alaska. So winter quiet isn't over yet. Now let's look at our current satellite imagery. We do have one low pressure system that's way westward out in the Bering Sea. Meanwhile, we have a low pressure system moving into the Gulf of Alaska, and we have this dissipating low sitting up near Arctic Village. Again, it's a little harder to see that circulation because it is dissipating, but it's there and bringing widespread snowfall. So here's our 1005 millibar low right in the interior, and you see this front stretches all the way out to Bristol Bay. So again, the source of all that snowfall we are going to be seeing. Meanwhile, we have this low pressure system in the Gulf of Alaska that's slowly moving in towards the Panhandle region. It's already bringing some rain and snowfall into that area today. We have a low pressure system way out in the western Bering, and we have this high pressure sitting near the Chukchi Sea up far north. For tonight's weather, that low drifts further eastward into the Chukchi Sea. This low pressure system drifts towards the Yukon further eastward, but very slowly. And you can see that frontal boundary remains across much of that area, and it's dissipating. It's still causing widespread snowfall. Meanwhile, we have a frontal system. It's the low pressure system in the western Bering. It's going to bring some showers into the central and eastern Bering, but fairly weak system at this point. Finally, we have that low in the Gulf of Alaska we were talking about, slowly making its way towards the Panhandle and bringing widespread rain and snow showers across much of the eastern Gulf of Alaska and much of the Gulf Coast. By Wednesday, you can see that boundary. We have another system moving quickly across the interior. That low pressure system in the Gulf of Alaska continues to linger, and along with this frontal system, bringing widespread rain and snow showers along the coast. Meanwhile, this high pressure system drifts further south into the northern portions of the Bering. And again, that continues to be a strong, potent barrier against these low pressure systems that keep developing off of Russia, but can't quite make it further eastward into the Bering Sea. We have a more potent low, 984 to the south, but again, it's being buffeted by this high pressure system in the Bering Sea at the moment for Wednesday. By Thursday, that ridge of high pressure begins to weaken. We do start to see a low pressure system start to move into central portions of the Bering. We have another Gulf of Alaska low moving in onshore, bringing widespread rain and snow showers along the Gulf of Alaska coast. So as we mentioned in the headline, wet weather for much of the week along the Gulf of Alaska coast. Let's take a look at your temperatures associated with these weather systems. Again, you can see we have temperatures in the mid-30s throughout much of the Panhandle for your Wednesday morning. Then as we go into the Kenai Peninsula, your low morning temperatures are going to start in your upper 20s. For your Wednesday afternoon, again, nice spring sunshine. We're going to see temperatures warm into your mid to upper 30s for much of the interior South Central and near 41. Kodiak getting pretty warm. We look at the Panhandle, again, ranging in the lower to mid 40s for your Wednesday afternoon. As we go into your Thursday morning, again, we're looking at temperatures in the mid to upper 30s in the Panhandle. And again, that's due to that low pressure system is going to keep temperatures pretty moderate overnight. So your Thursday morning temperatures are going to be fairly warm. Meanwhile, in some of the interior portions of Alaska where that low isn't as prominent, we're going to see some clear conditions and some pretty cool temperatures in our interior valleys for your Thursday morning. As we go into Thursday afternoon, though, again, that spring sunshine is going to warm us into the mid-30s, lower to mid-30s across Central. Well, we'll be lingering in the upper 40s for much of your Panhandle region. Let's take a look at your Arctic coast. Again, cold temperatures in place for your Wednesday morning. Look at that, minus 20. It's pretty impressive for this time of year. Minus 21 along the North Arctic coast and minus 19 in interior valleys. We're getting some pretty cold air and some pretty clear skies overnight for your Wednesday morning. And even closer to the Bering Sea and Chukchi, we're even seeing some fairly cold conditions. By your Wednesday afternoon, still struggling to even make it to zero across much of the northern Arctic coast, and minus 10 still. Cold temperatures up there. Could need an extra coat. Thursday morning down to minus 24 up on the Arctic coast, minus 17 along the Chukchi, and minus 14 in portions of the Seward Peninsula. So again, a very cold Thursday morning up in the north. By your Thursday afternoon, again, we're not even making it to zero across much of northern portions of Alaska. So cold air well in place in these interior areas. As we go a little south, we get a little more warm air mixed in, a little more sunshine. So better conditions, but still cold temperatures. It's a cold April. Let's look for your Wednesday morning across the Alaska Peninsula. And we're looking at temperatures in the low 30s to upper 20s for your Wednesday morning. As we go out towards the eastern and central Aleutians, we're looking at temperatures more in your lower 30s as well. By your Wednesday afternoon, we're going to be warming up, but you can still see in your Bristol Bay area, northern areas, we're looking at temperatures just in the mid-teens. As you get closer to some of our coastal areas, we're looking at temperatures closer to 40 for your Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning, again, chilly air in place in portions of northern Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim. But as we get into, again, more of our further south areas in the Aleutians, we're looking at temperatures in the lower 30s to start off your Thursday. By Thursday afternoon, we're looking at temperatures in your 40s or lower 40s. So for your CPC, your Climate Prediction Center outlook, cold temperatures in place for the next 6 to 10 days.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, on to flying weather here. We've got IFR, most of the eastern interior here, and then up along the north slope to the western central Arctic coast, or actually most of the Arctic coast, and also over the upper Tanana Valley, or into the Tanana Valley, on down into the Matanuska Valley, northern Cook Inlet, so sit in the valley as well, and then back along the Alaska Range down to the eastern Aleutians. Big area of IFR over the Copper River Basin, all of the Panhandle, central eastern Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island. Better conditions out here to the west, and VFR, northern Bering Sea, western interior with building high pressure. That continues to build in with colder air coming in. Much colder air back up here in the west and northwest. As the moisture slowly slides off to the east, conditions will improve. Still some VFR through the day along the central eastern Alaska Range, central eastern Copper River Basin, and lingering into the Matanuska Valley, especially over toward Chickaloon, Sheep Mountain, those areas, and then on down the southeast coast, becoming VFR in Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, and well off the southwest coast here. Marginal at times for the Pribilofs, and then more IFR out over the Aleutians and western Bering. And for the next day, that area kind of splits here with one sliding eastward, one zone of IFR sliding eastward, Adak and Atka, the other one kind of up into the north central Bering Sea. IFR St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait, and some massive IFR up here over the central western North Slope and Arctic coastal areas here, but a band extending, linking up with another area here. We still have southwest flow aloft with the trough axis back to the west, so that's going to keep pretty good IFR over the eastern interior from the Brooks Range right on down to the eastern North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle. And then the afternoon shows improving here, becoming marginal VFR from south to north, but holding on to the IFR over the northern Panhandle. Stays IFR over the eastern interior, becoming VFR, central and west side, right out to the west coast and beyond. And then front bringing a little band of IFR with it, pushing eastward here from St. Matthew Island down toward the Pribilofs into the east central Aleutians with some good VFR on either side of that. And for Anaktuvuk, IFR improving to marginal VFR, and lowest conditions for Adigan will be early on, but a little bit better into the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR to start, VFR to finish, both passes there. Not quite becoming VFR for Rainy, but after an IFR start there, probably a marginal afternoon. And then tomorrow evening becoming VFR. Windy, IFR to marginal VFR. And Isabel, IFR the entire day, as well as Mentasta, looks like it'll be IFR either approach there as well. And for Tanita, IFR flying. And Portage, IFR to start, becoming marginal VFR in the afternoon. And for Chilkoot and White, IFR. And for the freezing levels here at the surface, pushing all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula, right up through Shelikof Strait here, and back to the west, about 2,000 feet here just south of the central Aleutian areas, and then 2,000 feet up and just off the eastern North Gulf Coast down across the Panhandle. Icing, areas of isolated moderate rime icing, eastern interior, right on down to the North Gulf Coast, and a band extending southwest, mostly along in north or northwest of the Alaska Range, and on down across the southeast coast. And from there, taking a look at the jet stream, cold upper level low right through here, as you can see from the pattern there, 65 to 85 knot winds at 33,000 feet across the Copper River Basin. And the stronger jet now bulging northward here with building high pressure south of the Aleutians, so west northwesterlies, 100 to 115 knots out that way. 9,000 feet northwest, about 45 knots across the eastern Aleutians, 40 knots there, Bristol Bay, 35 to 40 along the southwest coast, and 35 to 40 out of the south for the Panhandle. And 3,000 feet, pretty light winds over the interior, but some good southeast winds with this system here in the Gulf coming up along the southeast coast there, up to 45 knots. A stronger 65 knotter staying down around the Queen Charlottes or to the south, but pretty light up over the interior here. Out to the west, pretty light for the Bering Sea. A lot of high pressure out here. And turbulence-wise, we've got moderate turbulence here for the Aleutian Range, light to isolated moderate turbulence, Kodiak Island, and the eastern Alaska Peninsula. And then pretty good likelihood of some considerable moderate turbulence for the Panhandle up along the North Gulf Coast, eastern North Gulf Coast to about Cape St. Elias.
Since time immemorial, that's when the polar ice used to reach us. Kulusik, the mother ice. The Gulusik was the one that set the winter, and it brought with it abundance of whales, seals, marine mammals.
I started going out in the ocean with my dad about 6 or 7 years old. We couldn't wait to go out to be with the elder men and face the ocean.
My dad taught me how to hunt and fish when I was a very young boy. He took me away out in the ocean, and he taught me how to ogre hunt. I got scared. I looked up at my dad, and he wasn't scared. So I haven't been scared ever since.
We would go out roughly 30 miles out from here, and you can hear walrus from a long way. They have very poor eyesight. You know, they could smell you, so you always went, downwind. In the old days, there'd be hundreds on a piece of ice, I always tried to find one or two that were by themselves. They could be a pretty dangerous animal.
And I felt privileged to be out there with my dad and his brothers to be able to provide for our family and our people. But little did we know this change that was coming.
My life cycle basically begins in January. So in January, we have muskox. We also have moose. Then that time of year, the crabbing in the ocean starts.
I have fish eggs, muskox, walrus.
April and May, I'm bear hunting. End of May, the ducks come. Beginning of June, the trout start running in the river, and we'll cut 100 trout to put in sea oil. End of June, the salmon show up.
Cranberries, blueberries.
In August, we'll do 100 to 200 silvers in the smokehouse.
Salmon berries, my rhubarb.
For 9 whole months, 9 whole solid months, the whole of the Bering Sea would be completely locked up. Now we're down to 3.
The ice is coming later and leaving earlier. We probably won't have freeze up maybe till January, but it's still too unsafe to go out on the ice.
The biggest thing I've seen out of this climate change is we have an east wind. East wind is always a warm wind, 30 above, 20 above. East wind brings warm weather. We need that 20, 30 below to create the foundation for us to operate on the platform.
In the Bering Sea region, sea ice is an extension of the land. It provides a platform for whaling, for travel. It enables them to hunt and to access food in the ocean that it would be much more difficult to access otherwise.
And this is the tomcod fishing that happens. But as you can see, there's plenty. A beluga, ogre hunting, one of our elders butchering a caribou.
We've lost over 70% of the entire volume of Arctic sea ice.
Ice used to be like 8 to 10 feet thick. Nowadays, it's like 1.5 feet, 2 feet thick.
Chop a hole in the ice and, throw some salmon eggs in there, and we pull out trout and whitefish and grayling. But if it's melting a lot earlier, then that opportunity goes away.
We can't venture out on the ice even if it comes up to our island. It's not solid, so we can't risk going out on the ice.
Many communities use shortfast ice for whaling, but they also rely on the pack ice.
Even in mid-March, I'm looking for ice as far out in the ocean as I can go, and that's not normal.
At the Arctic scale, we've lost over 40% of ice extent in the summer.
2,000-pound animal, to try to pull them up on the ice with the 4 guys, it's so much easier to go after them while they're on the ice. It's getting more dangerous to go get them.
Walrus has been our most powerful ally for survival. The tusks were used for tools, hunting, harpoon heads, spear heads, arrowheads, and the skin was used for food. The female walrus skin was used for skin boats.
1/2 ton of meat, blubber, and food, and that'll feed a whole village, man.
Our food resource has always been within close proximity to our villages, so that we didn't have to spend a lot of money to go fill our freezers.
What's going to be on the breakfast table tomorrow? In a week's time, will we have enough food to feed our family, to feed our community, to feed our children, our elders?
The other thing that the ice provides is a platform for sea ice algae.
When it forms in the winter, it's like a playground, and a living playground for a lot of the plankton and the zooplankton.
The krill eat the algae, the fish eat the krill, the seals eat the krill, the mers eat the fish.
Without the ice, we're losing all that, and we're starting to see a lot of shorebirds and even some sea mammals start. Just this summer, I counted 20 young baby ugrux from the spring that had started to death. Our garden is dying.
One thing about the native population is they adapt very well. You know, if the salmon go away, they replace that with something else. And if the ducks aren't coming, they'll find something else. Instead of waiting till May to go hunting, I'm hunting in April and March. I think we're facing a different kind of change that we haven't really seen before. I think, you know, if the crabs go or if the blue whales go and we don't see them, if the seals don't come back here, how do we adapt? I don't know that we can.
My ancestors say that we've been on that island for over 10,000 years. What is very powerfully painful to me is that as we're losing our age-old way of life, literally melting away, our identity is being lost. But we're still here. We're still who we are.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us on the marine portion of your broadcast. First, let's take a look at today's sea ice edge. You can see that we have fairly wide coverage of sea ice still in the Chukchi and the northern Bering. As we go further south, you can see, though, the sea ice edge continues to erode away, and several low pressure systems have been coming through over the last several weeks. And again, we are seeing the impacts of that as we continue to lose the ice edge away from St. Paul and St. George Islands. As we again look at the Bristol Bay area, we are seeing the same impact. So definitely seeing the return of spring and the erosion of our sea ice pack. We still have some sea ice in Cook Inlet as well, but in the northern portions, as you can see. Let's look at your marine forecast for your Wednesday. As you can tell, we have a well-developed coastal low-level jet all along the coast. This is related to that low-pressure system that is moving in to the Gulf and creating these strong winds. You can see we have gale force winds, waves up to 18, 19 feet in southern portions of the Gulf of Alaska. So travel with caution. And we are seeing waves still 15, 16 feet as you go further north. In interior sheltered areas, we're still seeing 12 feet for your Wednesday in Ketchikan and winds up to 30 knots. So almost gale force even in our normally sheltered areas. So definitely travel with caution, even up to Skagway, 4 feet. Thursday, we see that low pressure system weaken and move northward, so we do see improved conditions for your Thursday, but still waves up to 9 feet along the North Gulf Coast, winds up to 25 knots. In interior areas near Ketchikan, we are seeing waves up to 9 feet and winds 25 feet. Let's look for your Wednesday forecast. We have in the North Gulf Coast, we have winds calmer than what we are seeing in the Juneau area. Again, up to 20-knot winds, waves up to 7 feet. As we go southern portions of Cook Inlet and up through near Kodiak Island through our normally channeled areas, we're seeing waves up to 5 feet. So although it's pretty sheltered in Cook Inlet for your Wednesday, as you go further south, be careful of some of those outflow areas. As we move into Thursday, we see those areas increase in intensity. Gale force winds on Thursday. Winds 35 knots, waves 10 feet in southern portions of Cook Inlet. Even in normally sheltered areas north of Homer, we're seeing waves up to 4 feet, winds 15 knots. And as we go into the northern Gulf Coast, we see winds up to 20 knots, waves 6 feet. For your Wednesday marine forecast in northern portions of our Bristol Bay area, you can see we have winds up to 20 knots, waves 4 feet. In the Pacific side, similar conditions. Thursday, we see again winds of 10 to 15 knots and waves 2 to 3 feet. Similar conditions in the south as well for your Thursday marine forecast. As we go further west into the Aleutian Islands, again, a fairly calm Wednesday for the Aleutians, relatively speaking. Waves up to 4 to 5 feet, 20 feet as you get closer to Shemya. 6 feet as you get closer to Shemya with winds 20 knots. But we do have that low pressure system that we've discussed earlier that will be bringing near gale force conditions to Shemya and the westerns and portions of central Aleutians. So watch out for 30-knot winds, waves 11 to 12 feet. As we go up closer to the ice edge, you can see we're looking at fairly calm conditions for your Wednesday. We're seeing winds of 10 knots, waves 5 feet. As we go further north, we have winds 10 to 15 knots over your ice edge. As we go into Thursday, we have winds up to 25 knots, waves up to 7 feet right along that ice edge. And in ice areas, we see northerly winds of 5 to 10 knots. Finally, as we go to the Arctic coast and Chukchi coast, we're seeing generally westerly to northwesterly flow of 15 knots and variable wind along your Arctic coast. As we get into your Thursday marine forecast, similar conditions and variable winds. Again, you can see we have our low pressure Gulf Coast along the Gulf Coast and our weakening low in the Bering.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.